Humanities Montana State Council. Where a driving force for us is to establish partnerships across the state. We make available grant monies and quality programming to the different communities and cultural organizations in Montana, whether it be rural, Native American, or urban. We partner with libraries, museums, and schools to meet your particular humanities-based needs. Many of you may know Humanities Montana through these statewide grants and programs and be wondering, how does estate planning fit in? Humanities Montana's mission is to serve communities through stories and conversations. Our vision to accomplish this is by facilitating conversations about pressing issues, as well as supporting Montanans and other cultural organizations with resources. Dr. Marsha and the MSU Extension Office are wonderful resources, and the goal of today's conversation is to address pressing issues many of us are thinking about. I'm honored to introduce Dr. Marsha Goetting, a professor and Extension Family Economics Specialist from Montana State University Extension Office. Dr. Marsha has received state, regional, and national awards for her programs and has presented over 100 webinars in the legacy and estate planning in the last 2 years. Today, Dr. Marsha will address topics such as how Montana law provides for the disposition of real and personal property without a will and joint tenancy, as well as describing scenarios families may face in probate. This hour-long presentation will include time for your questions at the end. Please feel free to add the questions to the chat function in the bottom of your screen, at the Zoom screen. You will also have the option to unmute at the end. So won't you please join me in welcoming Dr. Marsha Goetting.
Dr. Marsha, I can see your screen, but not the slides.
Yeah, working on that. Because it's not working just right. So let me try something else. Would you believe we practiced this and I'm supposed to have it organized? Hi again. Okay, we're going to try this one more time. Share screen, pick this one, share, and do this.
We can see the first slide.
Oh, yay. Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Caroline. It's great to hear a little bit more about Humanities Montana. And just a little background about me. I represent the part of the university that is outreach. In other words, we have county extension offices all across Montana, and I work with those individuals doing the kinds of programs that they would like for me to do. And one of the most popular ones that has been around for a long time is estate planning. You know, by now I thought, okay, everybody would know about it. Well, no, there's a lot of things that impact us other than taxes. And that's what I try to focus on. And, you know, I don't know how many of you have met Sarah, but when she made this invitation, I thought, you know, it's really great that she's doing something very, very different for Humanities Montana. So I'd like to thank her for doing that. And then I would also like to thank the participants that are enduring yet one more webinar. And you know what? I think we're probably going to be doing more of these in the future because we've discovered we can do it. And for some people, they don't have to drive an hour to a meeting. Whereas in my case, sometimes it's as many 8 hours to get all the way to Plentywood and all the interesting parts of the state. But Sarah, let's go back to Sarah. When she asked me, she said, you know, you need to make your presentation really motivating and exciting because, you know, estate planning just sounds boring. And not only that, she said, you're on the program over the noon hour, so please do not put people to sleep. And that's what food does for us. So I said, okay, Sarah, I want to share with you some participant engagement tools to see if those would be acceptable. So here we go. One of the things we're going to use are polls. These are questions. And what we want to do is just get a sense of the audience that I have. So I know, okay, who am I talking to? And normally I don't even get to see some faces, but today I actually do see a few. So this is an opportunity for you. When did you last review your will? And it can be during the pandemic. Then I've got lists there of 3 to 4 years, even more than 10 years ago. Or if you don't have a will, you're anonymous, so you don't have to raise your hand. All you have to do is click. So Sarah, bring on that first poll. So when did you last review your will or your estate plan? If you've got a trust, that counts as well. Well, it's kind of exciting. I think the pandemic has encouraged us to do estate planning, and I would testify to that because I've received a lot more questions, it seems like, over the past couple of years. So let's end the poll here, Sarah, and here's the results. We've got about a third of you that have looked at it during the pandemic. We've got another third that have looked in the 3 or 4 years, but we do have 13% of you out there that don't have a will. And you know, you're so wrong. Because if you don't have a will, you are letting the state of Montana control what's going to happen to your property. And hey, you've worked a long time. You've been out there doing whatever you need to do, and you want to have control over that. So that's what we're going to be looking at a little bit today. The other thing, I like to open up the chat panel, and what Sarah's going to do is watch that for me, and we're going to make sure that we get to the questions that you answer. So please feel free to use that chat box. In addition, I'm a little bit weird because I like to use wildflowers to tell the story of estate planning. And the way that I can do that is use the names to help you remember some of the key points. I thought, you know, some people tell jokes. I don't tell jokes very well at all. And so I would try this approach. So try this. I'm going to explain to you why dying without a will is not the way to go. Do you get that double meaning there? Well, okay, moving right along. Here's my steer's head. You can find a steer's head at this time of the year if you're near Yellowstone National Park in a sandy area. See, it's really cute. It is a steer, and in my live meetings, I like to have people guess what it is. But there's the ears. You know, we got the 2 eyes, and yes, what I want to do is steer you to an awareness of Montana's plan for your property after you die. I also want to let you clue you in on title. People don't realize how they've titled their checking account, savings accounts, their house, and how that has an influence on what's going to happen to property. Now, here we have the Bitterroots. And you're Montanans, so you know that the bitterroot is the Montana state flower. Well, to me, what it reminds me of is bitterness that can happen when families don't plan. Once again, the state of Montana controls where your property is going to go. So let's look at a family and see what I'm talking about. We've got mom and dad, and that's some of you in the early years. Then you have children who get married. So some of you are in that category as well. And then you're blessed with those good old grandchildren. So this is a happy family. Everything is going great, but things started happening. For example, we've got a son that died in 1999 as a result of an airplane crash in Western Montana. Then we had a daughter pass away, and this was in Eastern Montana as a result of a car accident. Well, grandpa or the dad ended up dying because of a heart attack. So the survivor is grandma, but grandma passes away in 2010 and grandma didn't write a will. So my question for you is, you're the legislature, you get to determine what happens to property. What fraction, if any, are you going to give this grandchild with the red lightning bolt? And I'm going to give you some choices so you have a 25% chance of being right. Is this person going to receive nothing, 1/6, 1/8, or 1/9? So Sarah's going to pull up a poll or a question so that you can answer that. Nothing, 1/6, 1/8, or 1/9. So you tell me. Oh, I can already see some of you are being mean. You're not going to give that kid anything. And then we've got a spread of the rest. So let's see what we've got here. Aha, over half of you don't give those kids anything. And then we've got 1/9. Okay, let's see what the answer is, because 20 some odd % of you did get that right. And indeed, you are correct. It is 1/9. Now, the reason it's 1/9 is this concept that Montana uses is called right of representation. Okay, what does that mean? Well, what we do is we look and see how many children did mom and dad have. Okay, not 4, 3. Okay, so what that means, think of it this way, that one is representing the other. For example, this child, the turquoise child, receives 1/3. Okay, why is it 1/3? Well, we had 3 kids, right? 1, 2, 3. That means 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So it flows through to the biological or bloodline person. So this is why the turquoise grandchild receives 1/3. And then we've got the pink children or the grandchildren. What do they receive? 0 under right of representation. And they are wondering, didn't grandma love me? She didn't leave me anything. And then we've got the other 1/3. And you see that daughter is deceased. So the 1/3 flows to the 1/9. And see the son that's in yellow, he receives 1/3. And that is really why his 2 kids don't inherit anything. Now, those of you that are sitting out there feeling pretty smug at this point going, ha, 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 I have my will written. Does your will say your property will be distributed by right of representation? My attorney had that in my will, and I said, what does that mean? And he explained it to me, and I'm trying to understand, and I don't get it. And finally, he draws me something very similar to me or to this, and I go, now I get it. So you see, that's what you can do for your family. Draw your family tree in the box approach. And then if you have people that are deceased, eliminate those, and then eliminate yourself and see where your property is going to go. Now, I want to make a notice here of this child that is the turquoise one, and assume that that child is under age 18. What happens is we have to appoint a conservator to manage the money if that kid inherits more than $5,000. Now, who do you think is going to be appointed the conservator? Well, you're probably looking at me saying, well, Marsha, of course, it's going to be the mom, the wife. But let's say that for whatever reason, grandma did not like that wife. Maybe she is just disagreeable. Maybe she's an alcoholic. Maybe she's a druggie, and those aren't very kind terms. I understand. I'm not being very politically correct there. But at the same time, grandma could have written a will. And in that will, she could have said, I want to put my assets in a trust for that minor child, and then the assets will be used for the health, education, maintenance, and support of the kid. She could have done it, but she didn't. So we could have had that scenario. So I think there's other things that grandma could have done with her will. And maybe she has a favorite nonprofit. I wonder which one that would be. Of course, Humanities Montana, who is celebrating 50 years this year. So cool. She could have done that. So the tip from the Bitterroot is this. Decide if you want right of representation to apply in your family. And if so, that's great. But if that distribution wasn't what you wanted it to be, then you need to really take a look at either redoing that will or get the will done in the first place. Now, I bet there's somebody out there that knows what this flower is, and it's called a larkspur. And it's a really neat looking flower, regardless of you find it early in the season or later in the season. But I had a lady at one of my meetings, and she said, Marsha, you should not use this flower. And I said, why not? She said, don't you know it's toxic? And I just grinned and said, wow, that fits in perfect, because I've seen plenty of toxic family relationships. Okay, and this is one. Let's see how toxic relationships can develop. Here we have mom and dad. Mom and dad, in this case, have 5 kids, and then they have grandchildren. But the person that we're going to be looking at is the bachelor brother. He dies in 2020. He is survived by mom and dad, his siblings, and nieces and nephews. So bachelor brother dies. Who has priority to inherit his assets? Just tell me in the chat room. Do it real quick, real quick. Okay, Sarah, what kind of responses are we receiving?
Nothing. So, oh, here we go. The other siblings from Rob, Christine, the other siblings.
Okay, other siblings. Well, I hate to ruin your day here, but it's mom and dad. You see, that is his closest biological individuals. It's mom and dad that have priority over his brothers and sisters. Now, of course, if we only have one parent surviving, it's that parent that receives all the property. And we're talking substantial here, pretty substantial range. Well, let's say that mom and dad are both gone. Now who has priority? Well, you can enter that in the chat room, and I bet all of you are going to get it right, aren't you? Yeah, come on. You're going to say
Christine's siblings.
Yeah, your good old brothers and sisters, the ones you grew up with and you either had a good relationship with or a bad relationship. And this is what we call equal or per capita. So you see, you have the opportunity to do equal or per capita versus right of representation. Okay, but let's look at this family in a situation where he had 2 sisters predeceasing. Now I have a red lightning bolt on one of the green brothers. So you're going to look at this and you are going to be able to tell me what fraction, if any, that Larkspur brother is going to receive. Is he going to receive all, 1/2, 1/4, or nothing, because this is a bachelor brother? He doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have kids. It all goes to the state of Montana. So Sarah, bring up that there question and let's see what you're going to say. All, 1/2, or 1/4. Excuse me for a second. Ooh, ah, oh, give the results, Sarah. Okay, here's the deal. this was a question for me to find out how good a teacher I am. And you're telling me I am rotten, because look at this. We have all 15%. We have 1/2, 46%. We have 1/4, 15%. And some of you are even giving it to the state of Montana. Oh, my. I am such a bad teacher. It's not your fault. It's mine. Let me explain this to you, because only 25% of you got it right. You see, the answer is 1/4. What we do is we look and see how many siblings did the brother have. Okay, now we have to count those that are alive as well as those that are deceased. And so that tells us it's 1/4. So each is going to receive 1/4. Now, in the first case, this niece here that's receiving 1/4, see it, her mom would have received it, but it goes down to the niece. Now, this niece moved to New York City over 20 years ago. And she hasn't even been back to visit what she perceives as her hick Montana relatives. How you like to think of being a hick? But oh, she's Miss Hoity-toity in her high heels, in her matching bag. Oh, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And then the other sister, she's deceased as well. So that 1/4 is going to go down to nephews. Okay, one nephew is visiting a place close to Deer Lodge, if you can get my drift. In other words, he was arrested and convicted of drug dealing. You see, this uncle didn't respect his nieces and nephews. And he told people, gee, they're a bunch of turkeys. That was a term he used. And anyway, I don't want to tell any more about this family because you might be able to identify who they are. But what a sad situation. What do you think that niece wants? Dollars. Yeah, let's sell the place. And she can take that money and go to New York City and just live the life of a rich person, so to speak. So this is right of representation. So don't forget, figure out how many heirs there are. So if you've got mom and dad, it's how many kids they have. If it's a sibling, how many siblings did they have? Okay, and then more of you will get the question answered correctly. So right of representation, that's in there again. And it's very important that you know what that will do in your family. And it may be just what you want. But this guy, boy, I wished I could have sat down with him and just drew this out and said, hey, that niece that haven't had anything to do with you is going to get 1/4 of your ranch. Is that what you want to have happen?
Dr. Marsha, we have a question.
Okay.
This is from Yvonne. Why are the spouses of the deceased not receiving anything?
Why are the spouses not receiving property?
The spouses of the deceased.
Yeah, because it flows through bloodlines. You see, this example here, even if the brother had been married, or let's say the sister had been married, the sister that died in 2001. Okay, it doesn't go to the in-laws. In-laws have to be recognized in a will. They do not receive property. It goes down bloodlines. So what I think of is the Kentucky Derby and the horses. They always talk about bloodlines. Well, that's what we're doing with the law of intestate succession. So if you have an in-law, okay, that person has been an in-law for 40 years. And in some cases, the in-law, well, mom likes her better than the kid. You've got to recognize them in a will and say, I leave X% or certain amounts to my son, and then list his wife, and then to my other son and list his wife. And when you do that, then you've got 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. So that's what happens there. Okay. And if that doesn't answer your question, contact me via email and we'll work it out, or you can call. Now, we talked about something else the bachelor brother could have done, and maybe his favorite nonprofit was the Montana 4-H Foundation, as an example. So you need to decide, do you want your property to pass by right of representation and avoid those toxic family relationships? Now here we have Jacob's ladder. I think that's a really pretty plant. And that reminds me of the Jacobs family. And what we've got is one of the Jacobs family members died. So we have a surviving spouse, we have Jacob's parents, and we have the children. Okay, so this is what it looks like visually. Now, you see those red lightning bolts, so you know I'm going to ask you, what fraction, if any, are those children going to receive? Is it going to be a sixth, a third, a fifth, or nothing? So Sarah's going to bring up the screen. You have a chance to respond and tell me what you think those children are going to receive each. Okay, hurry, hurry. Okay. Well, look at that. We've got 62% of you that are going to give the children nothing. We've got 8% that said a fifth. We've got a third, or 23% that said 1/3, and then 8% that had 1/6. So you guys are pretty smart with this one, because the majority of you got that one right. Hold on here. Yes. See, the kids don't receive anything. And I really like to emphasize this when I have an older audience, because my older, I'll call them mature audience, tends to remember old law. And in old law, the spouse received a third and the kids 2/3. Not anymore. It all goes to the surviving spouse. So if we had 800,000, she receives it all. His mom and dad don't receive anything, and neither do the children. Okay. Consider what would happen if the surviving spouse remarried. Leave you with that thought. What we're going to do now is look at white mule's ears. I have a lot of people think those are daisies, but they're white mule's ears. And have you heard the phrase, mom or dad is as stubborn as a mule? Well, I'm sure I said that about my dad or mom when I was younger. So what we want to do is use these mule's ear to determine whether or not dad was really stubborn as a mule, or was he smarter than the average bear. So here's the dad situation. Dad owns property in his name only because his wife passed away 10 years ago. And he has 2 kids. Well, the 2 kids, he tells them, hey, there is absolutely no sense for me to write a will. Montana law is going to leave it to you half and half. So don't bug me. Well, I get a call in the office from one of the kids. And the kid says, you need to talk to our dad. Well, I'm a state employee. I can't do that kind of thing. But what is the kid concerned about? They're worried if dad marries that wow floozy from Billings, that there could be a challenge. Now, what did dad do with property when he got married? He put it in joint tenancy with right of survivorship because he wanted to show he loves her. She did the same thing with her property. She wanted to show him that she loved him. So we fast forward and we see what happens. Well, dad is no dummy. He said, look, boys, don't worry. I have written a will, and the will is dated after the joint tenancy was formed. So you two are going to get the ranch. What happens? Well, we've got that joint tenancy. And what happens is the new wife gets it all. And you're saying, wait a minute, there was a will. A will cannot control this joint tenancy. It's already predetermined. And anytime you write a will saying you're going to leave that property to someone else, boy, the attorney should have asked you, do you have property titled in joint tenancy? And if you do, we need further conversation. So she's got it all. Well, let's carry it forward and let's say she dies. Now, where does the property go? Oh, you're saying, oh my gosh, it's going to those kids, isn't it? They're going to receive 50% each. What about dad's kids? 0. Ooh, owie. Ooh, not the way that dad wanted it to go. And we could even have a different scenario. We could have said that the wife then married the good-looking hunk from Missoula. Okay. And she didn't contact an attorney. She didn't do any planning. She put that property in joint tenancy with a new husband. What happens when she dies? Oh, you got it. He receives all. So you need to be very clear. How is your property titled? And when we get married, we tend to put everything in joint tenancy with right of survivorship. And that may not be the best solution when we've got a remarriage. So if you want to provide for children from a prior marriage, what we've got to do is separate that joint tenancy and then take it from there, because he can have solely owned property, she can have solely owned property, and then each get to leave it in a will to their kids and their grandkids. So you got to decide, what are your objectives? Now, this flower, I was so excited when I found it because I had never seen one before. It's an albino fairy slipper, and that's what it normally looks like. Well, of course, I had to work it into my presentation. So what we're looking at is John and Mary Albino. And he's one of my traditional Montana men. Yep, you do exist out there, that keeps all the property in his name only. But John and Mary, they've told everybody that they want to leave their estate to Humanities Montana. Okay, that's what they want to have happen. So we've learned the property's in John's name only. They don't have kids. Neither one of them have written a will. So I'm trying to convince John and Mary that they need a will. And John says, nah, the property's in my name. It'll end up going to my relatives. And that's, you know, a nice addition, in addition to, we've told everybody we wanted to go to Humanities. So if Humanities Montana doesn't want it, then my relatives receive it. Okay. And so I said, okay, John, let's say you die immediately in a car accident out there on the interstate, and Mary survives you by 3 days. She dies on the 3rd day in the hospital. So I told you, no will, no kids. So whose relatives are going to receive that property that is in John's name only? Is it John's relatives, Mary's relatives, half and half, or Humanities Montana? So you can tell me by using your mouse to click on the answer that you think is correct. Well, Sarah, I think Humanities Montana is out of luck according to the responses that we're receiving. So let's take a look there. What we find is that about 38% of you are saying John's, 46% are saying Mary's, then we've got half and half. Well, those of you that are saying Mary's, I think you're thinking like a lot of my participants because of this. Mary lasted the longest, so therefore the property is going to go to her. Well, this is Montana. See, if you were in Kansas, you would be right. But no, you're in Montana. and the property is going to go to John's relatives. Now, those of you that are out there that said that, you probably feel pretty good about that. But if I ask you why you said that, do you know about Montana's 120-hour survival requirement? You must survive 120 hours to be an heir to take property. And Mary didn't survive that. She is treated as predeceasing John. Therefore, John's relatives receive the property. So John, with this example, says, I told you I don't need a will. And I thought, I'm going to take care of this guy yet. So I rub my hands and I say, okay, John, here's the deal. What if you die first and Mary dies 6 days later? Now who receives the property? Ooh, Mary's. And he definitely doesn't want it to go to Mary's relatives. And she doesn't either, for that matter. So you see, John, you need a will. Yeah, both of you do. So that you can assure that your property is going to go to Humanities Montana. And all I had to do really, instead of shaking my finger at him and say, you need a will, is show an example. And I find examples are good teaching tools because it helps people see where the property is going. Oh, this is a Jones Columbine. And that's going to remind me of the Jones family. If you want to find one of these, you look for a scree pile up high. We hiked in 3.5 hours to take a picture of this particular flower, but it reminds me of John and Mary Jones again. Well, no, the others were differently named, but this is John and Mary. Okay. And like before, the friends they had, the properties in John's name only. And in this case, we've got survivors of a spouse and John's parents, and they don't have a will. So we've got some money there. Okay. I'm sorry, it's covered up on my screen, but let's look at the money. How much of that money is the wife going to receive? Okay, so I'm going to give you some alternatives. Okay, it's a $500,000 estate. How much is the wife going to receive? 150, 325, 450, or all 500,000? So Sarah is going to bring up another opportunity for you to select your response. And I'm going to enjoy the answers here. Now, we only have a few of you, so participate so you don't get bored. All right, we've got responses. And let's see what we have. We have 21% saying 150,000. We've got 7% that said 350 or 325. And then we've got 71% of you that's saying she gets all. So let's see which group is right. Well, the interesting thing we find that the legislature has done is divided up by dollar amount. So it's not really a fraction, but we can use fractions to come up with dollars. Surviving spouse receives the first 300,000 and then 3/4 of the balance. Why? Because the legislature decided if the property was solely owned that the decedent's parents should share in the estate. So that means they get 1/4. So in this case, mom and dad are going to get 25,000 apiece and the wife 450,000. That means nobody got that one right, right? Am I right, Sarah? So I'm glad I asked the question because this is a law that a lot of people don't know about. Now, if the property had been held in joint tenancy with right of survivorship between the husband and the wife, yes, she would have received all $500,000. So those of you out there that have solely owned property, you don't have kids, you don't have a will, oh my, may not be happening the way you think it should. So consider whether sole ownership is the best in your situation. Is joint tenancy the best or not? Now I see we've got common bear grass, we've got common butterwort, common blue-eyed grass, common harebells. You know, I think I'm trying to provide a hint for myself. Oh yeah, tenancy in common is another way that more than one person can own property. And what it means is each owns an undivided interest. We don't have a house out there that we draw a line down the center and says, well, he owns this half and she owns that half. No, you own an undivided interest in the whole thing. So let's take a dollar amount and see what happens. Maybe we've got a home that's worth $500,000, and this husband and wife decided to title it as a tenancy in common. So that means he owns technically $250,000. She has $250,000. If he dies, it's his part that we're going to split out. It's not hers. So what that means then is we do the same thing we did before. The wife gets the first $300,000 and 3/4 of the balance, and the parents get 1/4. Well, in this instance, the estate is small enough that using that method, she comes up with $500,000, all of it. But if they had an $800,000 estate, look at the difference here. She gets 675. His mom and his dad receive 62.5 each. And you see, if the husband wanted his parents to receive the property, he could do that too in a will, but maybe he wants everything to go to his spouse. And so he would need to write a will that says, I leave my share of tenancy and common property to my wife, Julie. Okay.
Dr. Marsha, we have a question. Are joint and common tenancy the same thing?
Absolutely not. Thank you for asking that question because I wasn't clear. You see, if you have a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, you are already saying that the person's name on there is going to receive it. And that doesn't matter if it's a spouse or if it's a mom who has put the checking account in joint tenancy with the daughter, and she has 2 other daughters. It all goes to the surviving joint tenant. So think of joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Now, a tenancy in common or a tenant in common is where we have that undivided interest. So we could have 3 people. You know, let's say there's been a house inherited by 3 children. Okay, they're adult children. So in this case, they put it as a tenant in common because we've got a third, a third, and a third. And maybe each one of those 3 wants to write a will to leave their share to their children, or they can leave that share to the other brother and sister. So they're very, very different. And what I find is the most popular in Montana is just joint tenancy. That's all we know about. But tenancy in common is another one. And we have a MontGuide available from Extension that goes into more detail about the difference between joint tenancy and tenancy in common. So I'll show you that website at the end.
One more question. Would will override tenancy in common if tenancy in common was in place like it would with joint tenancy right of survival?
Okay, with a will and your share of tenancy in common, let's say you and I own tenancy in common. Okay, I own 50%, but I could own 90%. See, with the tenancy in common, normally it's 50-50. But if you have three, well, it could be 33, 33, and 33. But let's say you and I have done this, and I have 60% because I put more down than you did. I put 60% down and you put 40% down. Okay, in my will, I'm going to say my share of that, my 60% goes to my husband. So then my husband would end up being a tenant in common with you. Okay, so there are very important reasons to know the difference between those two. And I know it's difficult. The very first time I heard about tenancy in common, I go, what? And it took a while. But with the MontGuide, see, everything I talk about is in a MontGuide because I've had questions just like this at meetings through the years, and I've incorporated those into our MontGuides and my programs. I don't have to make up anything anymore. I got stories and stories and stories. So you need to look at your title and make sure you know what it is. You may have an old title that says just John and Mary. And what is that? Well, Montana law is going to assume it's a tenant in common, not a joint tenancy. Joint tenancy is always going to read John and Mary Jones as joint tenants and not as right of survivorship. It's really clear when you put in not as tenants in common after that. Now here we have a flower that is in the Gravelly Mountains. And I love the name. It says Old Man of the Mountain. And see, that's what people think. I bet if I could see all of you today, I would see a gray hair or a white hair or something, because people think estate planning we should do only when we get old. Well, youth on age is really the name of this flower that I found in Washington. And the youth think they're invincible. Oh, they're not going to die. Never. Well, come on. They can have auto accidents. There can be farm ranch accidents, cancer. Around Bozeman, we have rock climbing accidents. We have skydivers that the doohickey, the parachute didn't open. And now we've got COVID, we've got Delta, and some new thing out there. Well, we just don't know. So what we did, since we know about 7 out of 10 Montanans die without writing a will, and I was finding during my programs, if I could show examples, people would then be interested in doing some planning. So with the help of my great assistant, she made a Dying Without a Will website. I handled the subject matter part of it. She did the techie, and it's a great website. We're the only state that has one. And what you do is answer questions. Now, you don't do it out loud. You click, and they're all going to be yes, no. Yes, you have living children. Do you have living grandchildren? So you go through these series of yes or no questions, and ta-da, there is going to be an example that's very close to yours, plus a written description of how it's divided. And I think it's pretty cool. We've got 13 single situations. We've got 22 married situations. Yeah, here's an example. His, hers, and ours. And if you had $250,000, then she gets $200,000, and then his kids get the other. Well, his kids are his 1 from a prior marriage and 2 from this marriage. And if he didn't adopt this other child that was hers, that child doesn't get anything. So I think you would find that this website would be really good to illustrate to somebody who hasn't written a will. Maybe we're trying to get mom and dad interested. Maybe we're trying to get our adult children to write a will. And you can say, let's do this together and let's see what would happen. So try that out, okay? And if you don't have a computer or you don't have the interest in it, have those grandkids or those nieces and nephews help you out. So my tip from the old man of the mountain and the youth at age is if you don't have an estate plan, what you can do is use our website there to show what's going to happen. Okay. Now I've got the fairy slipper, and yep. And I should say, and give credit where credit's due. My husband and I like to take photographs of wildflowers together. And I took a photograph of this one and he did. Well, we brought it home, we put it on the computer, and then we voted on the best one. And his won. And it really was better, I had to confess that. But time has really slipped away very quickly. So I hope I steered you to an awareness of Montana's plan for the transfer of your property after you die. It's going to happen to all of us. The question is when. I hope I steered you to an awareness of how title to your property has an impact on who's going to receive it. Okay. And you may not have a memory like this elephant's head. I certainly don't. And you can see the elephant here, can't you? Ears, nose, beautiful flower. Look for it in standing water or once it's melted. You know, it comes pretty close after the snow. We have 50, 50 different MontGuides on almost every estate planning question available. So if you go to montana.edu and /estate planning, you're going to find those. Okay. And pick out the ones you're interested in. All have been developed as a result of questions that I've had from audiences. And don't forget, they're also available from our MSU county extension offices, whether you be in Missoula, whether you be in Baker, up in Plentywood, those county offices have those as well, or they would be glad to download them for you. So once again, I would really like to thank Humanities Montana for inviting me to do this presentation. I've been thrilled to reach what I think of as a new audience. And do we have any other kinds of questions, Sarah, that people are wanting some descriptions of or what?
I don't see any in the chat. Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself. I have also put all of Dr. Marsha's links in the chat box. It looks like we have another question. Are legally valid will templates available on your site?
Our will kits. Okay, let me tell you. The Department of Public Health and Human Services legal developer program does have an example of a will for a married couple and also for a single person. So at my website, I have a MontGuide on wills, which of course I would highly recommend, but right there with it, I have the links to the legal developer programs. And if any of you out there are over 65, if you are disabled, and if you are a Native American over age 18, they will work with you over the phone to develop a will, and there is no charge for that will. So that would be something to take a look at too. They're going to be traveling this summer and even up until September in different communities like Frenchtown, Baker, and a couple of others. But if you just go legal developer Montana, you will be taken to that website. And they have wills, they have a homestead declaration, which by the way, is now up to $350,000. And that's how much you can protect against creditor claims in a home that you have. So kind of a neat thing that the legislature has done. And another thing I'll just keep promoting, we have lots and lots of webinars. I have Fabulous Fridays, and those are over for right now, but we recorded them all. And so if you have something you didn't quite understand about what I said today, just go to Fabulous Fridays, Montana, and ta-da, you'll have some choices. I'm also doing programs in cooperation with AARP Montana, and we've got one coming up in June. June. Yes, June 8th. Got it. June 8th at 10 o'clock. And what I'm going to be talking about there is what's new in 22 in the estate planning area. Okay, so I invite you to listen to those. And if you don't find any of this stuff, just email me, Marsha.Goetting, Goetting @montana.edu. And I would be glad to direct you where you need to go.
Yes, there is a recording that will be available. We'll send it out next Tuesday, and the email will also include the links that Dr. Marsha is talking about today.
Okay, great.
That was a question. Sorry, Dr. Marsha.
Okay.
Any
Oh,
additional
just call me
questions?
Marsha. Just call me Marsha.
Just lots of thank yous.
Well, good.
Thank you all for joining us. This was really informative. Excellent presentation, probably one of the best estate related presentations I have taken.
Thank you. I try not to be boring.
You're definitely not boring.
When I first started, I went all the way to Sydney because they were having a great big estate planning thing. And there were all these attorneys in their suits, 3-piece suits up in front of this audience. And they spent 7 hours and all they talked about was federal estate taxes. And that was important at the time, I grant you. But it gave the impression that the only reason you plan is to minimize estate taxes. Well, we don't need to do that anymore. You could have an estate of over $12 million. And it's not subject to the estate tax. A married couple can have double that. So the planning we want to do today, for most of us, 99.98%, is to make sure that that property we work so hard for, that it goes to those organizations we want to support, to those family members, or even those good friends. Why recognize bloodlines when you really don't like that person very well? Well, recognize a friend.
Well, thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you, everyone, for attending. This is really wonderful. If you have any additional questions, please look for that email from us. You also have Dr. Marsha's email address. If you have any questions about Humanities Montana and what we do, our programs or grants, I've also included our organization's link in the chat as well, humanitiesmontana.org. And look for that email from us. Thank you again.